Osiris.
We're mass communicating. Mass communicating. Mass communicating.
Max here, and we've got a great episode for you this week. Our guest is the Laser Queen, Tara Gracer. Tara has been the band's primary photographer since 2023, and in addition to providing touchdowns all day with all of our cover photos, she is responsible for capturing some of the most powerful images of the live Disco Biscuits experience that I have ever seen. But before we get to our interview with Tara, let me first tick off a few housekeeping items. As we discussed in Touchdowns All Day, episode 63, festival season is upon us. The Biscuits kicked off the season with a late night set at Soulshine Reverie in Illinois. Next up on June 20th is Electric Forest. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it's the big one, July 4th through 6th, Lafayette, New York, Biscoland 2. BARBER previewed a little bit of what the band has in store for us, as well as some of the acts that he's most excited about catching in episode 63. We here at Touchdowns All Day are working on at least one more surprise for you at Biscoland, and hopefully we'll be able to announce that real soon. In the meantime, tickets are moving fast, so make sure to head over to bisco.land for all info about ticketing, lineups, camping and accommodations, and check out discobiscuits.com/shows for all of the band's upcoming tour dates, festivals, including that run through the Northeast and the tour ending shows out west. A little programming note. A few episodes back, we launched a new segment featuring fan covers of Disco Biscuits material. Since this segment debuted, we have received so many submissions that we have decided to dedicate an entire episode to them. So for our next episode, Touchdowns All Day, episode 65, I play your covers for BARBER, and he gives us his best Simon Cowell. It is like a heady American Idol, which I guess makes me the Disco Biscuits version of Ryan Seacrest. And so that's actually a terrible idea, but we are still accepting submissions. Send them to me at FYMaxwell on Instagram or X, and maybe you'll hear yourself on a future episode of the pod. While you're at it, we say it every episode. I'll say it here. Please hit us up on Instagram at Touchdowns All Day. On X, we are at TDADbaby. And of course, the number to call, the Touchdowns All Day hotline, 424-666-SIYD. As I mentioned earlier, we are blessed this week to have as our guest Tara Gracer, the band's official photographer. Tara is an incredibly talented artist who has really done an amazing job of capturing the Disco Biscuits live experience with iconic photographs that really encapsulate one of the signature elements of a Disco Biscuits concert, that being the light show, and specifically the lasers. Tara has worked closely with the band's lighting designers, Johnny R. Good, Andy Cass, and most recently, Alex Herm Schneider, to not just photograph the band, but actually to be a collaborative partner with these lighting designers to help create the visual experience that so perfectly complements the band's sound. Tara is a wonderful member of our community, beloved by fans, respected by other photographers, and we were fortunate enough to have her join us to talk about her artwork, her process, her technique, her workflow, and it is very illuminating, to say the least, horrible pun not intended, to hear her talk about her unique artistic approach to photographing the Disco Biscuits. One thing that I want to acknowledge before we bring Tara on is that Tara is the first woman's voice that you will hear on this podcast since I took over. That is not by design. And it is something that I've been wanting to address for a very long time. For as long as the Disco Biscuits have been a band, women have been an important part of the organization and of the scene. Women like Erin Trooper McKeon, Carla Neo, former road manager Mo Nadiak, and of course, Tara Gracer, our guest today. Very often their contributions go unnoticed or are perhaps overshadowed by some of the more vocal men in the scene. And Touchdowns All Day is committed to addressing that and to bringing to our audience the voices and the stories of the women who have shaped the Biscuits and their music and the community. So hopefully this episode and this interview with Tara will mark the beginning of a diversification of the voices you hear in this podcast and an acknowledgement of the massive contributions that women like Tara have made to our community. Tara, welcome to Touchdowns All Day.
Hello, hello.
So Tara, let's start out with your background. Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Varaždin, Croatia. And then we moved to the United States and we moved to the suburbs of Chicago in Deerfield, Illinois. And that's where I spent the rest of my youth and middle school and high school. And then I eventually went to college and grad school.
At what age did you emigrate to the States?
When I was 1, and we were here for like a little bit, and then we went back to Croatia because our tourist visas expired. So we needed to go back and spend some time in Croatia until we got the okay to travel back here again. And then we eventually applied for residency to be a permanent resident. And then getting a green card took forever. So, but we went back to Croatia when I was about 5, and I stayed till I was 7, and then I came back.
Did that experience of being split between countries and cultures, do you feel like that was formative, had an influence on your upbringing?
Oh, absolutely. My parents brought me up in a Croatian household. I speak Croatian, read and write Croatian. We tried to bring culturally like the food with us, but you can't find all of the ingredients. But my mom still cooks on a very European stylistic way. But it had a really big effect on me growing up knowing 2 cultures. So I was bicultural.
When did you first pick up a camera?
Oh man, first time I picked up a camera, I think I was around 11 or 12. I was pretty active. I was a swimmer, and I loved taking pictures of underwater scenes and plants in my neighborhood and stuff like that. And my dad noticed that I had like a natural eye talent for capturing certain things, and I have really good composition off the bat. And he promoted that by buying me a few cameras, and I started with mostly waterproof cameras because of the swimming aspect, and because I drowned one of his cameras during our conference finals, being the winners. But I was pretty young starting off, and eventually started also with a film camera when I was 15 in high school. So I've kind of always had it in my hand, taking pictures as I go.
At what age did you start to get serious about it, when it became more than just a fun hobby?
When I professionally started working was in 2014. That's when I became serious. I got my semi-pro DSLR. I started looking for clients to work with. I started working a little bit more on like my technique and overall deliverables. and kind of trying to, I guess you could say the hardest thing as an artist is to break out with your own identity and style that makes you you. And so I really started to hone in on like what my photos are known for. And I know a lot of you, like when you look through them now, you can see they're very vibrant, colorful, juicy, and have a very like high contrast with a lot of heavy blacks. Like I lean towards that and kind of developed that style. And that's what I was kind of going for. And then eventually I also worked with just educating myself. Pretty much everything that I've done, I've taken a couple photography classes, but they never taught you the mechanics of how to work a camera. It was always the artistic, compositional side, subject matter. It was never, okay, so this shutter speed does this. And when you have the flash on like this, it does this. And so a lot through of my own experimentation and self-taught, I was able to come up, with my now abilities, I guess.
Well, I was going to ask what kind of formal training, if any, you received. So that limited amount of schooling in the art of photography, was that in high school, college, beyond?
It started in high school. I always had one class a year that was photography, and I eventually did AP photo senior year, placed in a couple competitions, and worked and alongside that, not just artistically, but I did photojournalism. I also worked for the school's yearbook and newspaper, and our newspaper won a lot of awards. Like we were one of the best national newspapers in the country, which was kind of insane. And the guys really relied on me to have, that really good cover photo of what's going on in our school. And then that kind of translated into college, where I kind of was taking photos of what the swim team does, what my friends are doing. And that's kind of another aspect of photojournalism. And then I eventually got the options to experiment with some other cameras. Holgas are not recommended. They're very, very temperamental, but a lot of people love them. And then I eventually took one photography course that changed my life because I went international. I went to Barcelona for a semester, and there the professor pretty much just let me do whatever I wanted. I ended up taking over 52,000 photos that I narrowed it down to over the semester. And there was so much to capture on every corner. So I still feel today that I didn't get everything that I wanted, but there was so much to do and so much to see, so much to take apart. I even broke a few things when I was there. There was a mask parade, and someone backed into my lens, and the autofocus just totally fried, and I lost that lens. So I had to work with less lenses that entire semester. So I don't know, I just had a really good time, but I never had like a major or a minor in photography. It was always just a couple classes here and there to just kind of, I guess, hone in and provide the space to talk about it artistically.
So you mentioned a moment ago that an important part of your development as an artist was developing your own style. And I assume that means that at first maybe there were influences that you were emulating or examples that you were striving for. Who were some of the photographers who influenced you at an early age?
Oh, easy. Ansel Adams. Easy. That one's easy. I didn't study photographers in general. What I liked looking at is just overall eye-catching photos. We never really had like a history of photographers kind of course that we got to look at, but that's kind of like, I guess, from the more artsy side who I followed. But from the concert side, there's a plethora of people, from Jay Blakesberg, obviously, he is one of the most well-known jamband photographers ever of all time. And Steve was also another one. He's out in LA. I have a lot of mentors over the years, Paul Citone, and Now I'm blanking on one of their names. He's out down in the South too. But there's a lot of people that, that were my elders that I looked up to in the scene, and that I was a part of through Summer Camp Music Festival and other bands that I just saw their work and was like, oh, wow, how did they do that? And, oh yeah, obviously, of course, Abby Fox, she's out in Michigan. Her and I are still good friends to today, and we talk about concert stuff all the time. So it's a very interesting community to get started in.
Well, how did you get your start? How did you go from, documentary photography on the streets of Barcelona, maybe the Ansel Adams influence, which I would assume meant you were shooting a lot of nature. You said you're in underwater, you're in the pool, you're at the swim meets, but then somewhere along the lines, you go from that to shooting live concerts. What was that transition like?
Long and painful. It is not, it's not an easy profession. And I have a lot of young, prospering, photographers come to me and reach out, how do I get started? And that whole journey is different for everybody. Some people might start with a publication. I started with Summer Camp Music Festival. Ever since I started going since 2010, I always brought my camera. Even as just an attendee, it was with me. And at that time, there still wasn't like crazy regulations about you can't bring your DSLR in. I think it was, stated, you can't bring your cameras in, but it wasn't as heavily guarded. Security wasn't that crazy about it. But now, in today's world, you have to have a photo pass. You have to have some kind of credential that lets you in the door with professional detachable lenses. And so I started going to the festival, brought my camera with me, took pictures of my friends, really loved the festival and really loved the music. That music has a variety of genres of music. And so learning to photograph a variety of genres, it's difficult. Most people stay in one genre and kind of stay there and then jump from bands within that scene. But summer camp, has DJs, jam bands, funk bands, just everything you can imagine. And from people and also small local bands that are just trying, that have that grit, that are just trying to make it, and they're giving it, they're all on stage. So you have different varieties of energies. You have different kinds of fans to take pictures of. So that variety was a really good exposure, I think, to my start. And then once I was kind of there, I really fell in love with the band Humphreys McGee, and they allowed me to get in with my camera and start taking pictures. And then because I knew the music so well, I knew what was coming next. I knew who had the solo. I knew who was going to sing. I knew what their little antics and wisdoms are going to be. It was really easy for me to photograph, and I was able to capture them and their moments in such a way that nobody else has seen before. And eventually that prospered into working for them. And then I decided to move to Denver and to Colorado. I wanted to move to Denver in 2017, but I moved out to Colorado because I knew I needed that next step in my photo career, which would be constant concerts, clients that I could work with all the time. And it took me a long time here, about like 3 years, to work through the weeds of getting my name around, people knowing me, my reputation, that I can do good photographs. And now I'm here today.
Well, when you first started going to summer camp, and now I understand why, you very often post effusively about how important summer camp is to you. And I understand why now, not just for it being a great festival, but for really, it seems, being instrumental in launching your career as a photographer. When you showed up for that first festival, I think you said 2010, were you already a fan of jam music?
No.
Wow.
So I actually went to see the Avett brothers and Mo. I didn't like Humphreys at the time. And that's all I knew that was kind of on the lineup. I had no idea what else was there. And I think having that exposure to something and falling in love with it moment of is really, really beautiful. And after that weekend, for sure, I had this kind of awe moment of like, yeah, I think I belong here. This is what I love. This is what I like to be. And it just was really, really like a moment in my life where I was like, I'm never going to miss this festival. And I ended up even changing some finals around in college just so I can make it to the festival. I tried every year, even when I did it by myself as well. Like I went by myself. It's sometimes scary, you know, when you go by yourself, but it was the festival that put me on the map.
Do you remember what the first paying photography gig you had was?
It wasn't even a concert photography thing. It was just some simple headshots. You'd be surprised how much just people need some simple professional headshots for whatever LinkedIn or whatever their business purpose is. It's something simple as that.
Was it scary taking the plunge and putting yourself out there as a professional concert photographer?
Yeah, people sometimes don't take you seriously. There's a lot of people that will not value you with money and will not pay you because, you know, they can either find someone who will do it for free or pretty much they just, you know, will find any other means than just to pay with money. And a lot of bands, they'll say they'll pay you with exposure, which is okay in the grand scheme of things. But it's for some photographers, you know, exposure is everything when you're starting out. When you are coming from the weeds and you're trying to make a name for yourself, sometimes exposure is great, but it doesn't put food on the table. And you need to find a way to be able to balance both. There have been gigs, you know, that I've taken in the past, even now too, where I'm like, okay, I know you can't pay me. Can we work out something else?
How did you go from summer camp and Humphreys to the Biscuits?
So I started working for Cloud9 a couple years back, and I attended my first holidays in 2018. And ever since, you know, then the Biscuits were always kind of circulating on my radar, but they never were fully on my radar. I've even attended a Biscuits show in 2010, and it just didn't click. You know, they didn't come out to the Midwest. I didn't travel to the East. I'm a poor college kid. I don't have a ton of money. It was hard to get on tour to begin with Humphreys. So from there, I was kind of always just circulating in the jam band world. And I knew I wanted to work with a band to make them look good and work with their artistic and creative ideas. And I saw the Biscuits and still didn't click back then at the first holidays, went to another holidays. And then I was there and then I was like, oh man, something's brewing. And I believe that was 2020 or 2021. And I was like, man, something's really happening here. Like in my ear, I could hear this energy and this combustion happening and this kind of frustration. I was like, something's brewing. And eventually I started listening to more soundboards. I have Nugs. And then I was like, man, I missed this show. They really crushed this. And obviously I knew a lot of the crew members at the time that were my friends, and they threw me a bunch of shows I should listen to. And then I started getting into it, and I was like, wow, like it's happening. The Biscuits are turning a leaf. Something is happening. The energy is off the charts right now. And this also kind of coincided with my exploration of electronic music. I started getting more into house and techno. And I was moving away from Americana rock and progressive rock because I've been in that realm for so long. And so I started going to more electronic shows here in in Colorado. But then the Biscuits just found this medium ground for me where they were really working their transfusion sound with their new ideas and new creativity and bringing things to life that I've never heard before. And that's what captivated me. And I fell in love pretty quickly, pretty quickly. And then eventually it spiraled into, I'm just going to go to the show. And if I'm there, I might as well take pictures. And then I was like, let's photograph them and let's see what comes out. And some of the photos that I've taken when I wasn't officially working, I consider some of it my best work because I was just in the moment. But that section, that section of shows, I always look back to because those were times when everything we're talking about in terms of the Biscuits and their music currently and how they're turning it into a leaf and getting more creative, it just like zoomed up and skyrocketed from there. And every show started getting better and better. And the fans started waking up. The community was like, whoa, what's going on? And just seeing the communal like upheaval of everybody and like everyone else waking up and kind of enjoying that as well and capturing the fans and capturing what's around me too, not just the band and the music, but a lot of it's also the community. I've met some amazing people from day in, day out, people I've never thought I would ever communicate with in my entire life. So I'm very grateful for that. But it's not just the music and the band, it's the community too, because they're the ones that also catch the energy and throw that back to the band. And so, yeah, I fell in love pretty quickly, pretty hard, pretty fast, went to a bunch of shows. And yeah, I think my favorite saying is that I flew from Umphreys, Iceland directly to the Cap show, Biscuits, backstage, boom, 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 because I really, really wanted to be there.
So you mentioned that some of the first experiences you had shooting the Biscuits outside of festivals like holidays were you just as a concert attendee bringing your camera, taking photos from the crowd. When did you switch over to having an official relationship or status as one of the band's photographers?
So it happened kind of quickly, I think also as well, because the band quickly became admirers of my work of themselves, to see them through my eyes. They were like, whoa. So last year I filled in a couple times. So last year was 2023 and the end of 2022, I also filled in, which I kind of thought was a pretty big momentous moment in Atlanta. The Biscuits brought the lasers back. And when the Biscuits brought the lasers back, I talked to J.R. Good, he was a little nervous. He was like, I don't know if she's going to capture the lasers. I don't even know if she's going to get center. We had some giggles about that at that time. And I was filling in for Sam. I think he was really sick, but I'm glad he was feeling better after. And I had a really fun time crushing that show at the Tabernacle. And the photos came out, and I still think it's one of the most liked photos they have. And it's the green lasers with Mark in silhouette. And that was like, ooh, wow moment. And then I filled in a couple other times throughout 2023. I brought my camera along to the Cap shows, and I shot a pretty important laser photo there as well. I have it mounted downstairs on a metal print. And I think that's the one that kind of brought the tsunami wave of like, we should have her out professionally. And then I eventually got on tour with the guys of May of last year. So I just passed my 1-year anniversary of working for the band.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I started in the funniest of places, which is the South and New Orleans, which I was like, I didn't even know people went to shows down there to Biscuits. So had a great time there, and we went right to Iceland. And since I went to Iceland before with Umphreys, I kind of had, my lay of the land and knew everything that I was doing, knew the venue as well. and had a great time. And ever since then, I've been on tour.
Well, as an artist, I would imagine you want to be, specifically as an artist who is as collaborative as yourself, where you are working with other artists, you want to be collaborating with other people who are putting all of their energy and all of their creativity into their work. And so you came on at the right time. I mean, that Tabernacle show specifically, not only that photograph, but the debut of To Be Continued, that was a very big turning point in the band's career. Iceland, another huge turning point. A lot of moments coinciding with your arrival have been career defining for the Biscuits, not just in this new era, but looking back over an almost 30-year career. And it's been really amazing to see it through your eyes. For those of us who are following along at home, maybe watching streams, such an important part of the Biscuits live experience, for me at least now, is that post-show post on the official account that's, between 6 and 8 photos. There'll be some photos of the individual band members. There'll be some amazing full stage tableaus with the lasers. There'll be crowd shots capturing people in the throes of ecstasy, literally and figuratively, as they're throwing down up front. And that has become part of the package this bubble of positivity, whatever we're calling it, this new era in the Biscuits' career. Part of how we experience is through your lens and through your eyes. And so it's really cool to hear about how you fell in love with the Biscuits and how you sensed that momentum or that energy that was coalescing within the scene, of course, with the 4 guys on stage, but really amongst the fan base, amongst the organization, the crew, everything coming together and getting this visual expression through your work.
It's not always easy to take a 3-dimensional, even a sound, and put it into a 2-dimensional artistic capture. Some people have, told me like, oh, I can feel and hear the photo that I'm looking at right now, and then that kind of feedback is really good to hear, because that kind of combines, with my photojournalistic background. I'm good at capturing what's happening in the moment to give you that feeling of what's happening there on the ground.
How do you do it though? Because there are so many things that happen, these fleeting moments. Magner makes a face, or someone in the front row throws their arms up and tilts their head back, or there's a particular flourish on the lights. And in the moment, it's ephemeral. It comes and it goes. But the next day, it typically seems like no matter where you were, you captured it. How do you do that?
I don't know the percentages of this, but some of it's just good old darn luck, being at the right place at the right time. Other times I do rely on my experience and understanding musical structure, understanding people's energies, what a peak is in a song. When someone's really going to gun it in a solo and I can feel it, I'm going to go up there. I've had those moments when I'm trying to capture John and I'm like, okay, maybe tonight's not the night. He's a little reserved, nope, Aaron's got it. So it's going to Aaron. So I'm like running to the other side. So sometimes you'll see me like running from point to point, because I'm like, I know I have to be here for this right now. Every lighting designer has their own tells. I would say, let's call it tells. J.R. Good, beginning of the second set, he always had a few moments where I was like, I have to be somewhere in the center at times for those, because he would just whip something out that I've never seen before. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I get this? Right. Herm sometimes is a build throughout the entire show. So we'll start with minimalistic 1-tone colors. And then throughout the entire show, we're just building and building and building until we're climaxing towards the end of the set or the encore. But it also just depends also on the song placements in the set, what we have, what the guys have planned for that night. I know specific songs, specific moments I would like to capture. And then, we have, like in the jam band community, we have our sing-alongs. We we have a lot of songs we like to sing along with, and you have us yodeling and screaming during basses, right? And I'm like, oh, now we scream. So when I first started listening to bass, I was like, oh, this is where we scream. So that's my joke when that song's happening, and I know what the fans are going to be doing at that time, because as a fan, I'm in those shoes. What would be happening? Would I be singing along? Would I be dancing? So you try to put yourself sometimes in the fans' shoes to capture the fans.
Is it a challenge to prevent yourself from getting swept up in the moment? Because you're a music fan. You like the Disco Biscuits. There are times when I look over and I see you throwing down really hard too, but you're also working. How do you maintain that balance between being in the moment and submitting, just kind of letting yourself go with the music, and also keeping that eagle eye perception on everything that's happening in the entire auditorium?
Yeah, I think there were definitely times this year that I had to come out on the dance floor and dance with Joey too, and some of my girlfriends, Carolyn and Amanda. As a fan, I do want to participate, but you have a professional role where you have to play. And often, if I know there is something where I want to be somewhere with someone I will work around it, basically, saying myself in a schedule kind of way. For this, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to give myself that moment to enjoy. I did not do that for quite a while. There's been a lot of shows this past year and last year where I didn't do that, and I kind of lost myself because I was like, what am I here? I'm just kind of slugging away, and then once I got back on the dance floor, like, it kind of goes over you, overwhelms you, and then you're like, yes, this is why you're here, and puts you back into the perspective of the fan and why you're doing this and why you're here to capture this day in, day out.
What's different about shooting the Biscuits versus Humphreys or versus fill in the blank of any other band on the scene right now?
The Biscuits are hard to capture facial emotions. Now that they know who I am, and that when they see me, it's a little bit different of a relationship than what we had in the past. But I think now also with the difference in energy of playing, the facial expressions are different. When I first started photographing them, it was always dark on stage. They were not well lit, especially during their jams, because, we're going for a club-like dance scene. And that means the individual band members kind of recede in the background, and the intent is on the music, which I actually like, because sometimes when you photograph some bands, the light is always on them, no matter what you do, and then you're just going to get the same photo all the time. But this kind of presents complexities where if you only have, like before when I started working, you only have the first 3 songs. Very difficult to get a smiling photo of every single band member in 3 songs. But over time, I think now that, they're playing differently, they're in their positivity and all of that is coming out to shine, and their energies are coming out to shine differently. Their interactions with the crowd I can anticipate a little bit more. But that's kind of been my difficulty, is like, oh, I have these great light photos, but I really want to get some really good portraits of the band members. And so often what you will see with photographers, you will see just a picture of someone playing an instrument on stage, and they're kind of like in a stone cold face. And kind of what you talked about earlier, and I'm sure I mentioned this to you, is anybody who has a camera can take a picture of somebody standing on stage. But you need to get beyond that. You need to get the emotional feeling out of that image. So if it's just a stone cold photo of somebody, that's kind of the feeling that you're getting. So I've always prided myself on trying to get that emotion of those portraits out.
So we had some questions submitted by listeners that I'll intersperse throughout our conversation. One came from Greg Package, and he asked, which venue is your favorite to work in and why?
So I have a couple favorite venues because it's really hard to go from small to big. My favorite indoor venue that's kind of rather small is Milwaukee Riverside. Security has always been top notch there. The people there are amazing. The fact that you can leave the venue, go hang out at your hotel with your friends during intermission and come back. One of my favorites of all time. I've never not had a good experience there. Also, as a photographer, sometimes you get hassled at different venues just for having your camera out. So I've always had a great time with the staff there. It's whenever someone plays there, I wish I could always be there. That's one of my favorites. Smaller outdoor venue. I'm gonna put my money on the Mishawaka up here in Fort Collins. It's an intimate, smaller outdoor venue right on the river, and of course the staff is incredible. Will, who runs the place, is an amazing manager, and I mean, it's the ambiance, it's the feeling of being outdoors in nature. The river's rumbling right next to you, and you're just so close to everything, kind of nestled in this nook. And the experience is there. It's not the easiest to shoot because it's so dark and hard to capture because the haze doesn't stay constant because you're an outdoor venue. But it's one of my faves, and I will forever always love it. And then for bigger venues, I mean, yeah, let's just be cliche. I love Red Rocks. It's one of the reasons I moved out here, and I'm so excited I get to shoot Diana Ross at Red Rocks coming up soon. I've just gotten to shoot all these, like I had my first metal show on the Rocks this year too. It's a place where people come to enjoy music, but it's not just for the music, it's everything around. And I've been going to Red Rocks as an attendee since 2011, and I fell in love with the place right away. And I was like, I'm going to come back here. Like my first time there, I was like, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to take pictures of this place. And I'm glad to say that I got to fly my drone. I've been backstage. I got to see the Rocks backstage, photographed many family photos, many different kinds of artists from many different genres there. I work for Live Nation there. It's a great venue.
Well, I know Red Rocks is one of your sort of home venues. I sometimes see you there like 5 nights a week, it feels like, on Instagram. I'm wondering if it makes a difference being in a familiar environment like that when you might be shooting an unfamiliar artist. So like Diana Ross, obviously you're going to know 90% of the hits, but the metal band or whoever's playing at Red Rocks, when you might get the call, what's it like coming in cold to photograph an artist who you may be less familiar with or not familiar with at all?
Well, for example, I did not know a lot of Dispatch's discography, their catalog, and I photographed their Red Rocks Symphony show last year. And I came in and photographed their sound check, their individual band sound check, their symphony sound check, the entire show, and kind of some of the backstage hangs. And some bands, are receptive to new photographers. Some are hesitant. People don't know if they can trust you. But they've worked with me once prior in Mexico and had a really good time. So I had a good time that night and was able to approach it kind of with, I know what I'm doing. I've been photographing concerts for a while now. It's not always cookie cutter in terms of we're going to shoot the same thing every time, but it also depends on what the client needs. They need to do press photos here. They want a crew photo here. They really want family photos with their kids doing stuff. It changes from client to client, but I guess you could say that the familiarity of Red Rocks and having done so many different things there already definitely puts my mind at ease for, the options that are available and also the options that I can give the clients.
So apart from the Biscuits, who do you like to shoot?
Well, since I've been on Biscuits tour for so long right now, and now I've been home a little bit, I've gotten to shoot a few interesting bands, but no one that has really kind of topped kind of the jam band culture. That culture has a whole different way of presenting light shows to their fans. A lot of artists that I see come to Colorado, and when working for them or for Live Nation, it's usually a pretty simple light show. And as a photographer, there's not a lot of differences amongst them. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's kind of sad. But I got to say, one of my most favorite recent ones, just because of the sheer complexity of the production, was Korn at the Ball Arena. They had it's like a video wall, and you could see through it. So there was a video wall in front of them at the downstage edge, and we only had the first 3 songs from the soundboard. So not even the pit, just the soundboard. And with every song, the wall was going up. And what's also difficult is LEDs are complicated. LED screens are complicated. It's very hard to sometimes take a picture of moving pixels and light, and you'll get different kind of striations. You won't get a clear, beautiful image that you can see with your eye. And so you have to kind of work with those parameters to fix it with your camera. And it was just a very cool stage setup that I've never seen before, and having kind of that challenge of working with the video wall, moving wall, and then having the artist be energetic and the hair is flying everywhere and the music and people screaming. And, it was a lot of fun. And since they started that tour in Denver, their lighting designer actually reached out to me because he wanted the hard copies of the photos. And as a result, I got it to be in a couple magazines from that. Yeah, which was totally like, what's going on? And it was a couple lighting design magazines. And as the tour progressed, he was like, nobody else's photos kind of compare to what you did. And they were considering bringing me out for like a couple more, for like the rest of the tour. And I was like, I don't know if I can do it, because I had some, clients that I previously said yes to for other dates. But that was just, just a fun moment where I got to shoot something that I normally don't get to shoot, that's well above like, a normal jam band production.
Well, that's really an amazing form of praise. Let's shift gears back to talking about Biscuits. Let's talk about the shows themselves, your process. I see you at the shows and you're fighting through the pit. You've got tripods, monopods, you've got gear hanging off you. You're pushing through sweaty wooks. You're dealing with security. You're climbing over and under barriers just to get in position. It is a physical job that you have. You are busting your butt and you're in the dark. You're tripping over stingers. You've got stuff strapped to you. One of our listeners, Zach Smith, wants to know, what's the toughest spot that you had to work to get yourself into a show, to get the perfect shot?
Oh, well, I mean, I have kind of a horror story that happened to me. It didn't happen with Biscuits, but it happened with Humphreys. And so I set up one of my cameras. I had 2 at the time. I had a D750 and an 850. And I set up my 750 to take pictures of the balloon drop for New Year's. And this was, I want to say, 2016 in Atlanta. And it was the first time I'm getting paid for New Year's. Like, I'm so excited. Like, I got to get the ball drop and everything. And I set up my camera on the side of the balcony prior to the show starting, prior to everything, it was on a like a grip, and it was like gripped onto the balcony, pointing, and it was there the whole night. Nobody touched it. It was fine. And then I was in the pit, and the reason I wanted to be in the pit is because I wanted to capture the band and their wives and kind of like the interactions with the fans and everybody after the ball drop. And you can't be at two places at once. So you try setting up your camera in a different spot. And I was down in the pit. I looked up and the camera was sideways, and I was like, oh, somebody bumped it. You know, I ran up there, and my friend Crystal was like, I've never seen you run so fast. I got up there, took the camera, fixed it. And the patron was like, you can't have that there. And I was like, what? And he's like, you can't have that camera there. It's in my way. And I was like, it's been here the whole night. This will just be here for the ball drop. I'll come grab it if it's still in your way, but it needs to be here for the ball drop. And he refused. And mind you, like, this is like minutes away from the ball drop. And I'm holding my camera in my right hand. And he's like, no, you can't have it here. And he pushed it out of my right hand. I'm like standing over the balcony, and luckily I caught it with my left hand.
Oh my God.
It didn't fall on the floor and hit. Like, the biggest thing was like, I didn't want to hurt somebody. And I was like, sir, you can't do this. And he was getting very like physical and trying to get in a serious altercation with me. And I just stood up there, and I was like reaching with the camera. And meanwhile, it's like 3, 2, 1, and the balloons start going, the confetti is going, and you're just like, and it's a very stressful situation because I needed to get the shot, but the patron wasn't cooperating. And so I'm kind of letting it rip, where you just put your finger on the shutter and you're just, God, to hope something happens, right? That you get something. And I'm freaking out. And later I was pretty distraught. I was very upset. Like, I didn't want something bad to happen to someone on New Year's, especially people that I know down there. It was a very difficult situation. Security helped afterwards, but I did get a shot. It wasn't the one I planned on, but I did get the shot. I got a few shots as like the balloons were coming down, but it just wasn't, I didn't feel good about it because that happened. And it was definitely a hard situation. I learned my lesson, and always be insured, because you never know when something like that will happen. And we could have actually fallen and hit someone really bad, but I'm glad it didn't, and everything worked out for the best.
Wow. That is harrowing. So you mentioned earlier about the unique style of a Johnny R. Good versus Herm. So a lot of what you do, even with respect to your experience working with Tool, is a collaboration with the lighting designer. And I wanted to know if that was an explicit collaboration or more implied. As in, are you working hand in hand with the lighting designer, going over the cues? Obviously, you're in there during rehearsals and sound checks and technical rehearsals, but to what extent are you actively communicating with the lighting designer in order to set yourself up for success during the show?
I think it's varied between which lighting designer has the helm. In the past with J.R. Good, we would talk about, specific moments that he might look for. I'll help with centering of lights and lasers, especially if it's been a tough day and you need a second person. Sometimes I'll go and, discuss different, like, hey, are you doing this here? Like, hey, just so you know, we're going to do a group photo at the end. I need this lit up. Can you please remember? Those kind of communications. And I definitely think, as a concert photographer, you should be having those conversations with the lighting designer, because that is your source of light. If you need something lit, you should ask for it. With Herm, I've helped him a lot with trying to help him understand that the biscuits have their own look, and they have their feeling of a club, and like it's not lights on all the time. Like sometimes it's just lasers, and I'm very proud of them for turning on the lasers just once and learning how to do a laser drop. And when it comes with the music, and a lot of that is just feeling the moment and being ready, and practicing, and also praising and telling someone, hey, like you're doing a really good job at this time, or like, hey, maybe we could tweak this differently next time, but good effort, good try. And obviously every lighting designer is different, when they're programming, they program for sometimes different scenes or just specific moments. In terms of biscuits, Herm will program just the center photon light to be red for wormhole. Those are just some, or to be continued. He's done both, where one's white and one's red. I've helped Herm with, the Titan tubes. Sometimes, we're looking at the overall layout of everything. Is everything kind of symmetrical? Do we need to raise anything? And things like that, or like ideas that I have, like, hey, can you make this do this? Like I gave him an idea with the Titan tubes for crickets. I'm like, make them look like there's crickets dancing around, stuff like that. But most of that stuff, they kind of just put out there, and then I'll take it and I'll see what I can do with it. There's definitely moments, too, when the light isn't intense enough, and I'm like, hey, can you turn up the brightness for this? Like it's really not coming out. I'm pushing it on my end. Can we maybe change this for the next show? Just stuff like that I would definitely recommend. And I definitely recommend having the dialogue, with your lighting designer for any photographer, because you need to be able to explain what you need to somebody, because they'll be able to give you those couple of seconds, like holding a scene for you where the lights are just completely stagnant so you can get the crisscrosses or something like that. They'll be able to give that to you, but if you don't ask, it's not going to happen.
Are you in communication with the lighting desk over the radios during the show? So
I don't carry a radio. I don't have enough space for it. I'm just kidding. It's too cumbersome for me to wear. But I will sometimes during set break, we might have some discussions sometimes if we have time, or if I'm editing photos. I typically try. I was wondering if this might want to be one of your questions, kind of about my workflow. But yeah, so for workflow, typically we have VIP and sound check kind of at the beginning of the day. That's the starter, and then eventually I will edit those right away so that they're done for the night and ready to go. Then we have set one, and I'll download set one just to see what it looks like, what changes I need to make to my settings, and edit whatever I need to edit if I'm able and if I have enough time. Because sometimes the band, now takes like 10, 20 minutes to get up there and down, up and down. So sometimes it's a quick turnover. And then after second set, I'll finish up the remainder of second set and edit it as fast as I can. My goal is to be able to do, really quick edits. The faster you edit, the more efficient you are and the easier it's going to be. If it takes you hours to edit, it's just going to chew into your sleeping time, your overall, tear down time, and just well-being. You need space to kind of be you on tour. You also need sleep. And the faster you can do your job and do a good job, the better.
So are you editing everything you shot, or are you going through and making selections and saying these are 20, 30, 40 candidates for the post, or for nugs, or for whatever we have a need for immediately, and focusing on those?
So because of the nature of file sizes today, you have to only edit your selects. So let's say I'll go through, and some nights I'll have over 100, some nights I'll have 50, just depends where we are, what we played, what's going on that night. And how many like renditions of something. Like sometimes there's multiple laser photos, but they're just different colors. And so I'll make my selects first, and I'll do those in Photo Mechanic. Lightroom is really, really slow nowadays with processing raw images and just loading for a preview. After I have those selects, I'll import that to Lightroom and I'll batch edit everything first, just as like a quick edit. And then I'll go through individually each photo and just tweak things here or there. And then we're done. Like you can't move on. You can't make more and more and more and more edits. I mean, you can sit down and do more Photoshop edits, but because the photos are, required next morning for the final post about the show and the set list and everything, you need to be pretty quick about it.
So people want to know about the equipment you use, both your cameras and lenses, but also how you're editing backstage. Talk a little bit about your setup.
So my setup right now, I have one DSLR, which is my Nikon 850. And then I also have a Nikon Z8, which is a mirrorless camera. I just recently switched over to mirrorless, and it's kind of been a pain in the butt. It's not been
Why
the funnest thing.
Explain for a novice like myself who doesn't really know that much about any of this.
So, well, mirrorless has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantages to mirrorless is that the tracking for eye tracking and subject tracking is far, far better than DSLRs. And the electronic viewfinder is also really helpful in dark situations. Like sometimes I'm in the pit and the band and the light stop playing and everything goes dark, but I need to review my images. You can put the camera up to your eye and review in the viewfinder instead of having to look at the back screen and lighting everything up. So that kind of review has been helpful for me. But on the editing side, and I almost threw the camera out after that short, Biscuits run in Burlington, Connecticut before Halloween. I almost chucked the camera out. It's a different editing style than what I edit with my 850. So with my 850, that's a DSLR, I'm allowed to recover a lot more color and detail from the shadows. So if I want to bump up the exposure, I can bump up the exposure and I don't lose anything. I don't gain grain. And that's why sometimes I shoot my DSLR at the ISO of 640. And some of my friends, photo friends that saw me editing and they'll see my settings, they were just like, "What? You're freaking crazy. Like, how are you even taking a photo at 640 and exposing anything?" Right. People are like in the thousands for ISO and they're just like, "What?" So I found the transition from mirrorless hard because I just do not get the detail, the color and the shadows. So as a result, the photo and when you're exposing has to be on the money. Like you have to expose the skin tone correctly. You have to expose people's face and like overall exposure correctly. And that's kind of like been like my downfall in terms of like, I have to edit a total different file a different way. Even the lasers with the mirrorless come out a little bit different. I've noticed too, but I'm working to get it a little bit more to my desire. So I have two cameras. Up until recently, I used pretty much 2-3 lenses in my arsenal. 70 to 200 to 8. That's pretty much a standard zoom portrait lens. It's big, it's clunky, it's heavy, it gets everywhere, but it's great. It helps with a lot of the stage shots you need from far away and the portraits you're doing. Then I have a 18 to 35 3.5. So the aperture isn't the greatest, but it's my forever lens. I've had that lens for forever because all Nikon lenses fit on each other, no matter how old or new your camera is. I might have to replace it soon. I'm thinking about replacing it before we head out to Electric Forest. But it's my wide angle. I primarily use those for crowd shots, for people and things like that. And then I have a variety of fisheyes depending on which one I wanted to take at the time. I've used a Rokinon 12 millimeter fisheye. I've used a Nikon 16, and I have a 10 to 14, something super odd fisheye. But most recently I upgraded my system to have a mirrorless lens, because when I was shooting people, I noticed that the lenses that I had just weren't keeping up with the new technology, because you need new on new to really get like the fast action moments, like when John's dancing, or when Aaron's like moving his hands, or when Mark's being all smiley, like, or when I'm going like this 100 miles an hour. Like, you need something that can keep up with you. So I got a Sigma 35 to 150 to 2.8, and it's been a great lens. I have some emails to send to them about it, but it's nice that you can go from such a wide focal length to such a nice portrait length, which is 150. But that's kind of what's in my arsenal in terms of lenses. I have a monopod. I've also upgraded to a wireless trigger, because you need to be able to execute a photo above the crowd. You'll often see me pop my camera up on the monopod and up above the crowd, ripping through photos to try and get one that's hopefully steady and without your hands in the way. But don't stop dancing and putting your hands in the air. Yeah. I have that, and then I'm trying to think, like, what else? I try not to carry too much, but it does look like I have a lot of stuff. I usually have a flash as well, that you're not allowed to use during the concert, but sometimes people ask me to take their pictures, and sometimes I don't carry it at all. I have a lot of fast reading cards, so that when I'm downloading after a show, the files download really quickly. So I'm not waiting. So, like, let's say I'm done with the show, I drop the files right away, I go pee, come back, it's already done. So that helps cut down into the editing time. And then, like I mentioned before, I have Photo Mechanic for culling photos, which is just making all of my selects. And then I use Lightroom primarily for editing everything, and then Photoshop for touch-ups.
The gearheads amongst us, Kevin Metsenka specifically, he'll be very pleased to have all of that information. So I'd like to know, to what extent are you looking at the set lists before the show? And if you are, is it influencing how you approach the night? Like, for example, if you know there's a big Crickets coming and you know that Herm is going to trigger a specific cue at the Crickets peak, are you then saying, okay, 45 minutes into set one, I need to be positioned to capture that moment because I know it's coming?
So there's been a lot of shows in the past, especially when I didn't have access to the set list, and also I didn't want to see the set list. There's moments where I don't want to see the set list because I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of the audience and how everyone's feeling. And if there's that moment of surprise, or that moment of like, oh my God, they're playing this, like, and I can catch that essence, it's more fun to shoot sometimes when you don't know the set list. However, like, most recently now, when we have a lot of intricacies in some set list writings, I have to know what's when at what set list. So I will look at the set list, and it will kind of help guide me throughout the night where I have to be, or where I want to be for something. So, for example, like, I don't know, we know at like the end of the show, we'll do a family photo. I have to remember what the last song is, or the second to last song, so that I can get in preparation on stage, so that Mark can see me. And so he's like, okay, she's here. I don't have to scream to go get her, because there's a lot of that going on too, where like I have to just be there and present and ready for the next thing. But then, some set lists I look and I'm like, okay, I know we're doing this jam. Like, okay, so how do I capture this? Or I know this moment's coming up in this song, like I kind of mentioned with like people singing. Sometimes I'll be in the pit because I know I need to be there for that song. But yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Do new songs require you to come up with new strategies? I mean, we're in a period where the band has introduced 25 plus songs in the last 3-4 years since basically you came on. Are you having to approach those new songs in new ways, or is it possible to just take them the way you would take a Biscuits classic?
I don't know if I would take it like a Biscuits classic, because some of the new songs the audience members haven't experienced yet. And there's a lot of people, their first, even if it's their first show, there's a lot of people that I've met this last tour that it's their first show. So that energy is completely different than like an older song hitting, I guess you could say. So like when Fire Will Exchange was hitting for the first time, I knew I had to be in the center to get everyone's hands up and just how everybody was just letting go, during those moments. So there's, I think, definitely a little bit of difference between the new songs and the old songs.
Do you have a favorite song to shoot?
Oh man. I mean, I love shooting I-Man because of the energy.
Yeah, that was the right answer.
I knew that was the right answer.
That was the answer. Yes. And Chris Woody, a great stalwart of the Biscuits scene and of being dead center up front. He knows that too. He does the rotating video during the I-Man chorus, and it's always such an exuberant moment of jubilation. You talked earlier about the sing-along moments, but there's just something about an I-Man chorus. It's both a Biscuits classic, and it's such an easily accessible song for new people as well. So you'll see in some of those pans that Chris shoots, the entire room just lit up with the biggest smile, so much happiness. It's so infectious. So I love the fact that you feel that too.
I feel it, and I try to capture it every time.
So recently you've had opportunities to work alongside your partner as a lighting designer, Nick Koski. In addition to lighting the Biscuits, occasionally Nick works for a number of big acts in the jamband world. And I was wondering, what's that experience like? And has being in a relationship with a lighting designer given you new insight into their psychology and their working processes?
Yeah. All I'm going to say is lighting designers, they work their butts off. They don't sleep or eat for the entire day that they're programming things. They're often on their feet the entire day. They don't even have time to run to the bathroom. They're always troubleshooting, and they're always in this mentality of like having to finish, how do I get there? And there's so many complexities to setting up lights. But being with Nick now, I finally learned the names of some lights. So I'm really happy about that. I can name things on stage and be like, ooh, I like that one. And I like what this does. And understanding kind of what it is to put on a production makes me understand, how to do my job better and how to be more communicative of like what my needs are on stage and how to make them look better. I do have a really good eye, at centering things. So often we'll help with lights and lasers and just trying to make sure that it looks aesthetically pleasing when you have that really nice stage shot. You want all the symmetrical lights and lasers to look good. But it's been a great ride with Nick so far. We've had our fair share, and I'm really excited to shoot some Ween this summer for him in Montana at Kettle House Amphitheater. He just finished up Karina this past weekend, her sold out show in New York, which was a blast, and he absolutely crushed it. He had so much going on, but he crushed it. I saw all the videos. But from the Biscuits world, he was able to come in and sit in for a couple shows and fill in and put in a helping hand, and seeing him light up, his favorite band and get the opportunity to do that. It's wonderful to see someone so happy. You don't always get a chance to do your dream job. But he has a knack, he did, because he's coming from the Biscuits realm of being an older vet, and he knows all the old songs. So he laughs. He's like, all the newer stuff, and I know all the older stuff. So he's like, you got to help me with this. But he loves the Biscuits, and he's always looked up to J.R. Good because of the complexity of production that Johnny brought, and also the look that he curated for so many years for the Biscuits that carried the identity of what the Biscuits look like in real life. And you can totally see that in other shows that he does for Eminence Ensemble and other jam bands that that look of J.R. Good kind of comes out, and I'm like, oh, I know where you got that one from. So it's been great, and just understanding a lot of things. And for me, from my world, it's helped me immensely just to understand what I'm working with and dealing with. And now I know a whole new world of the music production world. So it's been awesome.
Well, that definitely, I can definitely see how that would give you an edge, not only in being able to understand and anticipate what's about to happen, but also, as you mentioned, the importance of communication, of asking for what you need, whether it's lighting on one of the band members' faces or holding a look for a half beat longer so that you could capture that static moment. Apart from your unparalleled communication skills, what is your secret? Why are you the laser queen? You have this name, this reputation, well deserved. There's something different in your shots. You talked at the very beginning of our conversation about bold images, bold contrasts. But what is the technique that allows you to capture the Biscuits lights, regardless of whoever the lighting designer is, in a way unlike any other photographer?
I would say it's my knowledge of photo mechanics, so how to actually work a camera for low light situations. I would say I am working, when you're working with lasers, you're working in a low light situation, and you need to be able to calculate, your conditions appropriately and be able to anticipate. And also, not every show is going to be the same. So you have to be able to be adaptable. And then just knowing the mechanics of what I need to do for that, combined with, my look, my style of editing, because you can take the picture and someone else can edit it completely different than you. I think those two things are, the mechanics and my style of editing are the things that make me me. And maybe that's my personality too. And happy, cheerful energy. But I think those are the primary things that make me and qualify me as Laser Queen.
So for the last few tours, you've been one of, if not the only, women on the crew. What's it like working in such a male-dominated environment?
It's not for everybody. It's not for every woman. A lot of the girlfriends and wives, they come up to me and they're like, I have no idea how you're doing it. I have no idea how you're on a bus with all of them and all the farts and all the things. Like, no idea. And I'm like, it's not that bad. Like, they're really good. And they're like, how do you put up with it? And I was like, maybe I just don't notice it. And maybe I'm just not, bothered that much. I'm just more like, in my world, we're here to do this. Let's do it. Being the only woman is not the easiest thing. It's difficult, but then you got to remember, like, you're with people that you trust. If you're not with people that you don't trust, then, it's not going to work. And I know if I ever needed something, or if I had a question or needed something, I could always ask anybody. So I think that's one of the important things. And we all have each other's backs.
So rock photography is a male-dominated field. A lot of the names that we discussed earlier are conspicuously men, but there are big exceptions. Obviously Annie Leibovitz, who, essentially invented a lot of the iconography of concert photography, as well as portraiture, the John and Yoko portrait and all of the Rolling Stones stage shots. People like Jill Furmanovsky, who shot Pink Floyd on the Dark Side of the Moon tour, or Lynn Goldsmith, who shot Patti Smith and a lot of the New York punk scene, or Jenny Lenz, who shot a lot of the UK punk acts. But one thing that I encountered in doing a little prep for this episode was an interview with a photographer named Beth Ann McConnell, who talked about the sexism she encounters on the road, like in the venues, in the crowd. For example, security people assuming she's a fan or a groupie when she's got a laminate and a $10,000 camera strapped around her neck. or other photographers not taking her seriously, not respecting her work or the value of it. And I'm wondering, as a woman in this field, are you experiencing that? Is it something that you're encountering? And how might we begin to address it as a community, as a scene?
I definitely think that there's a standard against us women that's put out there, and you always have to show up in a different way and make noise than your male colleagues would. I guess you could say that the expectations for me are higher than others because I have to achieve, it's not just something bigger and better, but something iconic in order to be recognizable. And day in, day out, to be iconic is very difficult. You can't just be iconic every single night. So if you're lucky, you make something iconic every couple of years that you might consider. There has been, a lot of stuff on tour where I do get oh, you're a woman, you wouldn't, you're not that good, or but most of our scene, has been very open and praising to me being there. They're very surprised. I think the first couple times, I think everyone was surprised that a woman could shoot the biscuits so well. They were like, oh, wow, okay, she's actually good. She can actually capture lasers. Oh, she actually knows what center is. Oh, she can actually do all this and turn everything in and make it look good and make me feel good too about the photo. For me, I try to stay away from the negativity and the mansplaining of how to do my job. There's a reason I'm there. I'm good at what I do. And I know that I'm there because I am good at what I do. There's been moments in the past where people don't understand. I've never came from, I guess, like a groupie circle. I really just am there to enjoy the music and dance and have fun. I'm not interested in people's personal lives as much. I really am just, hey, if we're friends, yes. But like, if you're a band member and you're one of my clients, like, I'm not going to, pry you about things. Like, I really would just like to be there, capture, enjoy the music, have fun. I don't know. It's been a difficult world. I think it's been, as you can tell, all my greenhouse lights just shut off. All my plants.
My timers are at 9 p.m. So I still have some time.
Yeah, mine are at 9 p.m. too. But so for me, I haven't, I don't know, maybe I've just forgotten over the years everything that's kind of happened to me and kind of brushed it aside because it doesn't matter to me. Because I've been pushing hard for so long, trying to get my name across everywhere, that I was like, it's just hearsay. It's just here. You're somebody outside of my peripheral vision that is saying these things. There's definitely been, moments at different venues with different staff. I think it even happened this year at Tahoe where I showed up and, some of the house crew was like, the show isn't open and you're not allowed to be here. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm the band's photographer. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry. And I was like, it's fine. It's okay. It happens a lot. But I often joke around and just kind of like move on, I guess. But it is difficult being in an industry where it's predominantly male, where people who are male get the upper hand because people who are buddies, they get to go forward versus where, there's a stigma with us that, oh, she's trying to sleep with somebody to get somewhere or something like that. And that's why I've always been really, really honest with myself about we're going to do this merit-based. And, if relationships come as a result, they come as a result of a connection, not because of like a professional aspiration. And I want my work to speak for itself. And yeah, that's kind of been my perspective over the years.
Well, I'll say my perception has been that apart from the work that you do, your actual job, your art, your photography, you do other work through your presence, maybe unacknowledged, unpaid labor, but I know that your presence is important for a lot of people, male and female, that you, as a member of the scene prior to becoming a member of the crew, which is true of many of the crew members, but as the one crew member who circulates through the crowd during a show and who has constant interaction with the fans and who is alongside us in the pit, in the balcony, around the venue, you are a representative of the band and the organization, a delegate in some ways, and your presence and your patience and your generosity with all of us who are on the other side of the stage. I've definitely recognized it myself, and I've definitely recognized it in the people around you, the appreciation we have for you as someone who understands both sides of that divide, but who also understands, very importantly, what it's like to be a woman up front. It is a very male-dominated space. It is a physical space. There's a lot of machismo. There's territoriality. There's a lot of big bodies banging into each other, sweaty guys. And I know from many women, it can feel like an inhospitable space to dance, to have fun, to just enjoy yourself, let alone to try to do a job. And so your presence there, my perception of it is that your presence there makes it feel like a little bit more of a welcoming environment. And the work that you do, where you demonstrate that you can do this job as well, if not better than any man or woman, I think is a powerful statement, something that means a lot to a lot of people in the scene. At least it's been communicated to me.
Oh, well, that's wonderful to hear. And I do often see myself as this bridge between the fans and the band sometimes, because I get to interact and touch both, right? And I get to see what goes on out there, what the ear whispers are and what people are saying, and what the energy is, even in the depths of the room. You know, one of my favorite things that I like to talk about is this past year at Ashland, when the entire room was dancing from front to back. You know, it was just insane. And I don't know how. No, not Ashland. My God, it's
Asheville.
Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
Sorry. I was like, we never went to Ashland. Bend, Oregon, when the whole room was dancing from front to back. And, you know, the band can't always see the back until it's lit, but I peruse around through everything, and I get to feel the energies around me. I get to experience what other people are experiencing. And I get to be like, oh, you know, this might not be the best venue because X and X, like, you know, we didn't really enjoy this and this, or something was really something was going down in the back, you know? And then I get to have the perspective of being with the band and the crew, and, you know, having the crew, you know, working their butts off day in, day out, setting everything up, tearing everything down, making sure everything works for the band. And then the band themselves, like creativity, like, what are we going to come up with tonight? What are we going to rehearse? What are we going to play? You know, experiencing all that together to kind of put this complete picture on the day. It's been a great experience and privilege to be a part of both, because not a lot of people get to be, I guess you could say, beyond the barrier of the photo pit.
That's true. So, Tara, I know that photography is only one of your jobs, and that you actually have a day job. Many people might not realize that. Do you care to talk about what your other career is?
Sure. So in college, I studied economics and environmental studies, and then I eventually went on to grad school to finish a master's in geography with a specialization in hydrology, which puts me as a hydrologist. And I eventually worked my way from being an AmeriCorps member, an intern for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I worked in the regional office in Minnesota, and now I'm here in Fort Collins at the headquarters at the Natural Resource Program Center. And my position, I am a contractor, not an official federal position, but I work as this is always a mouthful, the water resource administrator for our database, and it's for our entire agency's database. And I oversee the functionality of the database to make sure it's functioning, working. All of our water data is coming in. We have live water data feeds that are coming in as well. And just to put it in perspective, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have like land, kind of like the National Park Service, but they're not national parks, they're refuges. And we have them from Guam, Alaska, all the way across the United States to Puerto Rico. And so I oversee all that data and all those data sets, and to make sure they're fully functional. And yeah, it's been pretty great with them.
How do you balance a very demanding day job with going on Biscuits tour? It was one thing when the Biscuits played a weekend here or there every 6 months, but now you are on tour.
So I'll often get up in my bed and I'm starting to work in the mornings on the bus right away. I'll just roll over and open up my computer and start working. Starts with checking emails, making sure the database is functioning. And if I have nothing scheduled for the day, no meetings or anything like that, I'll do whatever paperwork I need to do, instruction manuals and things like that. I'll get that done for the day. And then it usually takes up pretty much the rest of my day up until I get into the venue around 3 or 4.
So you are fully working both jobs while you were on the. I'm even more impressed by you now.
Yeah.
I was thinking she must be taking a lot of PTO and sick days for all of this.
No, I'm trying to work as much as possible, and I'm really lucky that I get to work remote. And sometimes, it's difficult on the road. We don't have the best internet access, or I don't have the right internet access, or sound check has started and the drums are drumming, but and I have a meeting or a call, but it's been really forgiving that, I can be fully remote while doing photo as well on tour.
That's amazing. And I know that this isn't technically a job, but you're really good at it, and you probably are making a little bit of money on this hobby of yours, which is the cultivation of rare succulents.
Yep. I think I'm going to actually officially file for a business license, and I think we're going to do it. I'm just going to have it in my back pocket, whatever I can move, but I collect exotic and rare succulents from all over the world, and all the way from crazy Korean hybrids to cacti that you would normally see in like very expensive shows. It's been amazing to watch them grow, and also it's kind of easy to take care of. They don't have a lot of requirements, and living in Colorado where it's dry, they're pretty happy here.
Well, I think you're not properly giving yourself credit, because I've killed many of a succulent. Fortunately, none of the ones that you've gifted me. Tara was so generous as to send me a care package from her collection of some of the coolest plants that I now have. And so if you guys haven't seen her photographs of some of her collection, you absolutely have to. I think, do you have a separate Instagram that you dedicated to your succulents? Yep.
I have a separate Instagram. It's called The Succulent Eye, as in your eyeball. I fell in love with the name because I thought when you're looking at succulents, you're always trying to be catchy. And also they grow in like a Fibonacci sequence, which is usually a spiral or really beautiful and eye appealing pattern. So that's the reason for the name.
Amazing. We'll make sure to check out Tara's succulent page, as well as Tara Gracer Photography. Is that the official Instagram handle?
Photo with the F.
Sorry. Tara Gracer Photo. FOTO.
Mm-hmm.
On Instagram. Tara, as we wrap up, looking ahead to summer tour and beyond, what are you most looking forward to?
Oh, snap. I'm looking forward to the return to Pine Creek. I think we're going to have a really, really good fun time. I'm also looking forward to the guys' Electric Forest set. I'm wondering what they're going to pull out because they did such a great job down in Texas for Eclipse. I'm really hoping they can roll and bring that energy into Electric Forest. And I don't know, I think that's it about now. I have to get excited about the other stuff because it's been a little bit since I've seen all the tour dates, but I think those are the things I'm most excited for.
What about for yourself? What's next for you in your creative endeavors? I think I'm going to do some upgrades on my gear. I'd like to get a new flash that's a little bit stronger and brighter. And I might upgrade to a wide angle lens that's a mirrorless wide angle lens that's compatible to my Z8 so that I can shoot a little bit better with that. I might rent one and might rent one for Electric Forest to see if I like it before purchasing. But I think that's about all I'm going to do for the mechanical technical side. Creatively, we have a pretty packed summer with the Biscuits. I have some other tour dates and stuff for other bands I'm going to catch up on. I'll be at Red Rocks for Humphreys McGee. I'm making my return. Not going to summer camp this year. Unfortunately, I'm taking some time off just before the start of this summer because it's going to be pretty crazy. And then I'll be in Montana for Ween, and my boyfriend Nick will be doing lights. So really, really, really excited to get to capture some Ween. Well, last question. What advice do you have for any aspiring concert photographers in our audience?
The advice I usually start out with is learning your camera. Learn the extents of your camera. Learn what it can do. Learn how far you can pull that ISO before you get the grain. What settings do you need for certain kinds of lights? And practice. Once you know your camera, you know what you can do and under any circumstance with the light when it's switching. And if you're aspiring to be a concert photographer, give yourself some time and some grace because it might not happen overnight. It might take, a couple of years before you get a gig and something that might launch you into another sphere of the concert festival scene. Just be patient with that. And if you really, really want to do this as a profession, have a side job, have a side gig that can just at least pay your bills while you're working to make your portfolio and your contacts and your clients and your networking, something that you do have to fall back on when you don't have a couple of good months. And I did have a couple of photo friends, that were about to quit, and I talked them down off that ledge because, they do great work, but you can't sometimes feed yourself. And I told her, I was like, look, just get something to cover your bases, a temporary gig, like a temporary temp job, something, and follow your passion. And now she's doing crazy stuff in Miami, just outrageous. And so I'm just glad that, some people stuck to their guns and just got to stay true to you and don't let the music industry tell you you're horrible and boggle you down. Work on your craft, work on getting better, and you're your own standard.
Well, that's good advice, not only for aspiring photographers, but I think for everyone. Tara, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
You're welcome. It was such a pleasure to be here. I hope you have a great time with your succulents, cacti, and all your plants, Max.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tara Gracer. Thank you to Tara, not only for being our guest, but also for supplying the podcast with the beautiful images that we use as our cover art week in, week out. Touchdowns All Day is an Osiris Media production. Check us out on the web at www.touchdownsallday.com or use the hashtag touchdownsallday on all social platforms. We'd really appreciate it if you could rate or review us on iTunes or Spotify. And while you're at it, share an episode with a friend. Word of mouth is a great way to spread awareness of the podcast and everything that's going on in the Biscuits universe. John is at Barber Shreds, and I'm at FY Maxwell on Instagram and X. You could also get us at TDADBaby on X and Touchdowns All Day on Instagram. Finally, you could reach us on the Touchdowns All Day hotline, 424-666-SIYD. This episode was written, produced, and edited by Max Dawson. Mastering by Matt Dwyer at Osiris. Big Touchdowns All Day thank you to the Disco Biscuits, Mark, John, Aaron, and Alan. The entire touring crew. 1111 Management, that's Ben Baruch and Andrew Kaplan. The Touchdowns All Day Advisory Committee, Andy Bazzani, Mike Walsh, Russ Tabes, Dave Cook, Rich Steele, and Scott McClintock. Joey Friedman and Steve Martocci. And finally, an extra special thanks to Lisa Gutwillig, Deb Brownstein, Angelica Magner, Sandra O'Quinn, Andrea Rivers, and Avery McMahon. On behalf of John Barber, the entire Touchdowns All Day family, this is Max Dawson saying, see you next time.
We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating. Mass communicating.
Osiris.